This is number 92. All right, so starting off this week, I I was looking at this new so pretty much I wrapped up the mech prototype last week, and this week I had a fresh slate to start working on this mech or this the first boss prototype here. And just like usual, I was just starting from zero, complete scratch. Well, and kind of saying, okay, let's do this. We got to get our first boss in the game, and so I started by just plunking in the basic model like I usually do. Nothing attached to it, no controller, basically Zippo, just what they provide like usual. Just the armature, just the meshes. And I just started doing what I usually do. I think I built the first and obvious thing was to add an AI controller and go through the usual formality that I usually do when adding a new AI. As proper subclassing of the controller to make sure. This one I subclassed the first one, which is a shooter melee. So instead of just a shooter or just a melee, it is a shooter melee. Um, and then on top of it is a boss shooter melee, and then on top of that is a crab tank AI controller, which is a boss shooter melee. So we have our custom controller class hierarchy ready to go, and I started putting in all the necessary. I use the snake to kind of fill in the right fields and get everything filled out, and put the rigid body on him like I usually do. Um, and made gave him his own nav mesh because he's quite big for navigation, and also, so let's see, this is actually his navigation rigid body collider here, so he's quite big. Um, so I got the basic controller all hooked up and ready to go, and I was kind of sitting here. It's like the first 2 days. I don't know. I was kind of dragging it or something. Monday and Tuesday, I don't know. I was watching a TV show or something, and it was a real page turner, and I was staying up late, 1, 2 a.m. or whatever, just, oh, I gotta see what happens next. But I kind of broke my sleep cycle, and it's like Monday and Tuesday. I was like, I wasn't really like clear. My head was fuzzy, and I don't know. I was getting work done, but I was just tired, and like the first 2 days, like I was kind of falling behind, like on my focus. Like every time I'd like lose focus, I'd stop the timer, and I just fell further behind. So the first day, I fell 3 hours behind. The second day, another 2 hours. So I was like 5 hours behind, like right in the beginning of the week, and I had to make up those hours that I never really caught up. Like the rest of the week, I put in my 888, but I never really caught up. So I had to make it up this Saturday to make my 40. Um, but the first 2 days, I was kind of like, I just got the obvious stuff out of the way, building the basic controller, and I was kind of seeing like, what do I do now? Like it was almost like I couldn't continue to build stuff until I actually kind of had a good idea, like requirements, right, of what to build. So I kind of had to like put, I couldn't just start building stuff. So I had to kind of put like construction implementation on hold and what I had to do was kind of put on my game design hat, right, and kind of say, okay, let's zoom out and say, how is this whole thing gonna work? How is like this whole boss interaction gonna work, right? I kind of played, a very surface level with like ideas, like okay, you got this crane here, and then um, you're gonna be able to interact with these little terminals, and then drop these overhead crates. Yeah, I was getting a little bit of skipping issues, memory issues. I might have to restart the computer. But anyways, so it's kind of taking a step back and giving a bird's eye view, like, okay, how is this whole thing gonna work? I have this kind of this crane thing that you're fighting under. I guess the point is to like drop these overhead these containers on top of the so you hit these buttons here, and then when he's underneath it, then it drops on him. You do that 3 times, you win the fight. But I kind of had to think about like everything that's gonna happen in the encounter, like really put on my game design hat, and that really took some, because it was just really, I really had to kind of sit and flesh out the details. Like I had an overall kind of um, rough idea of what I wanted to do, but um, I didn't really know for sure. You have to have solid requirements in order to implement. So I got, I just kind of, what I did in order to figure it out, I kind of just, implemented the basic behavior of like, I implemented the basic behavior graph for him, and he, pretty much copied over from the HK Snake. And, it's pretty foundational. So I just had him, detect me, set up the detection, make sure everything, and just had him chase me around a bit and kind of like, just fine tune and tweak and just do like a really rough gameplay testing and just kind of, um, just have him like chase you around and kind of get an idea of like what you want to what you want to happen to the fight, like roughly in general. So you just kind of like chase me around and stuff, and like I'm kind of thinking, okay, maybe well, I need him to do some attacks. Like what kind of attacks is he going to what kind of attacks is he gonna do to me, right? Is he going to do a melee attack? Is he gonna do shooting attack? Like, what kind of attacks are we talking about here? So, I was going back and forth with AI and like trying to really scope out the whole thing and trying to really flesh out like what's gonna happen. Like, oh, maybe, it's like if you go into cover, you can do like an EQS where he chases you around and repositions and like, and I kind of like went into my assets and be like, okay, let's find like a rocket launcher. I didn't really have a good rocket launcher kind of thing. This is like the best thing I had, and I think it works pretty good. It's not like, like a multi, but it kind of, so I kind of did what I did before. I kind of strapped these onto the armature, and they're like, fixed on there. The same thing with and I found some turrets. So basically, I came to the decision that he's gonna have like four kinds of attacks. I was going through and like looking at his animations and stuff, and I was like, okay, so this fight, you know, you're not gonna just wait for him to. You're not gonna just wait for him to be under the crane or whatever. Like if it's moving back and forth, you're not gonna just wait for him to be there. He's gonna be constantly coming at you, giving you pressure, attacking with ranged and melee attacks. So basically, the fight, there's a couple ways you can do it, and this is all like game design. This is really thinking about it and be like, okay, if I do this, but basically in conclusion, it took me a long time to like really flesh out and really come up with like the design that I'm gonna build for this fight. So basically, my what I over the first 2 days, I okay, this is how it's gonna do. This is what I'm going to implement, right? So basically, what you do for this fight, you come, he aggroes to you, you start the encounter or whatever, and he's gonna start coming at you very slowly, like at a slow speed. And basically, what he's got going on here is like a kind of like a not a timer, but he's kind of recharging his energy. And what happens is he's gonna do his range attack. He's gonna come at you slowly. When he gets within range, he's gonna do range attacks, and he's not gonna stop, but he's gonna keep doing his range attacks, and you're kind of meant to dodge those attacks. And whenever he does a range attack, it gives you kind of an like a after he does a shooting or whatever, and you dodge it, you can actually turn around and do some damage to him. And that kind of what it does, it kind of slows him down. It slows down his regeneration. It damages him in that he kind of doesn't regenerate energy as fast, where he can actually do a melee attack, right? Or something like that. Like I'm pretty much 90% on the design, but the last 10% requires going to be like gameplay testing to make sure that the actual theory is correct. But like I've come to the like conclusion on paper where it's like this is what I'm gonna do, but it still needs to be validated with gameplay testing. But anyways, you can either attack him, slow him down, so he can't really get a speed boost, and that kind of slows him down, and that allows you to like go to these little like dispensers where you can pick up a mine and then place it wherever you want. And I guess he either walks on the mine, or you bait him into doing a jump attack on the mine, and that stuns him for like a good amount of time and keeps him in place. And when that happens, then you run over the terminal to release the actual container and do a critical damage to him. You do that 3 times, you win. There's another one though. There's another strategy where, and I was coming up with this where, and this is actually a core mechanics update where before on my player I had everything drawing off the same energy controller, but that doesn't really work in this situation because what you can do, especially if you're powered up, like you can actually use the stealth button as an easy button. And this is the first time like the rub is really hitting the road on the core mechanics of the gameplay testing. So if I didn't, so I'm gonna have to separate the actual stealth energy regeneration from the actual shield and weapon, right? It's going to have to regenerate much more slowly. That way you can't just what is this? Yeah, you can't just keep hitting the stealth button whenever it's convenient, and then having him lose sight of you and then go get a mine, and then that would be way too easy. So, but I want to have it slowly regenerate where like if you get into trouble, like your shield goes down and you're hiding and he's really about to kill you, like you can use it as like an emergency escape or whatever. That's really what it's meant for. Um, and then um, also you can use it tactically. So let's just say you want to use it instead of slowing him down. You just want to, when you have it, you can actually use it tactically and say, okay, I'm gonna lose him now, and then go work on getting a mine and placing it until the next time the stealth recharges. So it gives you kind of a twofold approach. Like you could either attack him to slow him down, but while you're attacking him, there's risk because you have to go toe to toe with him, and you have to dodge his rocket and his strafing attacks, his machine gun strafing attacks, or and when that happens, if you lose your shield, like that's when you have to kind of go into cover, and going into cover gives you a little bit of uh, recharge, little recharge boost on your shield, so that you can come back out and then re-engage. But it's almost like, yeah, if you have your shield, you're supposed to like engage him and do some damage to slow him down, get him into a state where he's more slower, that he doesn't, because when he's recharging, when he has his full energy to burn, he's going to choose to do like a speed up. He'll speed up from slow and he'll move really quickly to catch you and do a melee attack, and that after that he burns his energy and then the cycle repeats itself. So you're kind of dealing with that, and then also if you lose sight of him, he'll do is like he'll that'll give you a little window where he'll kind of like be looking for you, but then he'll have like this omnipresent thing like the snake. Um, it'll be a short window. Then he'll come right back to you wherever you are. You come back to your general direction with EQS. So the EQS system, when he loses sight of you, so he can reacquire you, and also let's just say you're in cover, he will he will actually know how to path around the cover and get behind you and flush you out from cover, things like that. So again, there's going to be a lot of gameplay testing, but once I had this kind of like blueprint of the design of what I'm going to build, then I feel comfortable, like finally, like, yeah, when there was no more to really think or consider or flesh out, then I said, okay, let's start working on building stuff. And that was about on Wednesday. I started doing the first thing. The AI was saying, the AI was recommending like, oh, do EQS stuff first, but I was just thinking about it like, I really need to get, like, I have basic spotting and chase working. I think the next logical step is actually getting a first kind of attack done, right? And so what I'll do, so I started working on the first kind of attack. So there's four attacks, but the first one is um, this little rocket thing, and basically I had to set up a new projectile. I had a rocket in mind from the VF pack I usually use. There was this one like looked like a good candidate, but the I kind of had to modify it because it acted like a projectile that went straight on um, a linear course trajectory of where it was shot at. I wanted it to actually do something like this, where it would shoot in the air and then kind of use physics or whatever, like gravity, would come back and arc around to the target. So working with AI, it gave me a little algorithm to kind of apply like a gravity change trajectory over time to kind of get this kind of thing going, um, and also apply a bit of like tracking to it, right? Because if you fire it to where he was and then he's moving, you'll miss him every time. But this kind of homing, it kind of uses my standard algorithm to kind of take the character's rigid body and then predict the where it's gonna be, and then so most of the time you'll get some sort of hit to it. And by the end of the week, it was blue, but I actually turned it to a different color here, and it kind of and then toned down the explosion because the explosion was massive and it was just all over the place. But I think this explosion size looks pretty good. Um, once I got that done, I hooked it up for both sides pretty much, and then I hooked it up to my behavior graph actions. So basically, when he on his attack, he'll just do a basic attack, and then he will. I defined, how many volleys. So each stage, like, there's like two volleys for each side, and then the next stage. So there's three stages after the first hit, stage two, second hit, stage three, third hit. But each stage he gets a little bit more aggressive. So he'll actually shoot like three volleys for the second stage and whatnot. But um, one of the gameplay that I'm gonna do also is like there's a little window like right about the rocket's about to hit you. If you hit the dodge or the jump at the right second, it'll give you like a special dodge animation, and and your dodge will not. Your dodge will be like almost double the speed of what you usually do. So it'll really get you out of the way and maybe do a different animation of like an actual dodge instead of just like jumping like you normally do, where the rigid body keeps the exact same speed. You're just you're doing an actual like timing dodge or whatever. That's yeah, that's more gameplay stuff. But so I got the first attack looking good with a rocket attack, and then on Thursday I think I was moving on to the next attack here, and so what I did here is I said, okay, it's gonna have turrets. Can I reuse my turret controller class, right? And I had extended it already from security camera to security turret with like a two axis targeting, and I needed to kind of extend that functionality even further because this turret is a little bit different because it doesn't really have like any detection. Detection's kind of handled by the overall controller that it's a part of. This is just meant to actually do tracking and firing and all that, right? So I kind of had to kind of go and uh, while I was at it, kind of restructure, refactor, reorganize, and clean up the actual turret controller so that I could use it in this context where um, it would be um, it would be useful in this context as a turret for like an enemy that's moving around and stuff. So one of the kind of things I kind of like unlocked another level of like engineering understanding where for the longest time I was always like an inheritance guy, which is there's like the classification of inheritance. You can say is like the boss is an enemy AI, and then you can share common functionality through inheritance. And I've always understood that. The next kind of concept was um, is called interfaces, where um, a good example is well, interfaces. The paradigm is called can or can do. Uh, so a crab can be hit. It's an AI, and then also a player can be hit by a projectile. But both a player or even an obstacle, like an obstacle can be hit by a projectile, but an obstacle is not a player and it is not a enemy AI. But they can share, they can actually define common interfaces of how to handle and what happens when it's hit by a projectile. So, um, my problem was I was trying to figure out how to actually solve the problem of this turret controller because I had one turret, my security camera. It security camera doesn't have a weapon. Um, and then, but this turret, this turret here does have a weapon. Both of these can detect, um, but so it's like, and then this third one, it doesn't detect. So it's like this one can detect, this one can detect, this one can shoot, and this one can shoot. I couldn't build an inheritance prior. I could not build an inheritance hierarchy between the three because you know it just wasn't flexible enough because like some can do some things and others. So it's like the real trick here is is the third thing, which now I see more and understand in my toolbox more clearly, which is composition, right? Which is using a third class, just kind of like we do with these game objects. This is composition. Each one of these monoscript actually adds a class onto the overall game object that kind of adds certain behaviors onto each. And this is kind of the same thing I did here. So I abstracted down the ones that you couldn't inherit cleanly for all of them, which is, I think it was detection. Yeah, detection and weapon. Um, yeah, weapon module. And then finally, um, yeah, because this one has a weapon module, but it doesn't have detection. So by using external classes as components, I can actually access them in my turret controller and then have that functionality of what's needed. So this needs a weapon, but it doesn't need detection. This needs detection, but no weapon. This one needs detection and a weapon. So each one inherits and shares the common functionality that needs as a turret, but only takes what it needs for components, for component functionality. And that's how to solve the problem. That's really because interfaces wouldn't do it. If I put interfaces for like weapon in here, I would be defining the logic, duplicating logic for each one of these. It would be duplicated logic. Like that's not the way to do it. Like it's only like you can only duplicate logic if it's if it's not, yeah, if it's like not even like this class, the obstacle, and then the AI, like that's a good case for interfaces, not components. So now that I kind of have a better understanding of like, I could use this way to solve this problem. It's like three core elements of engineering here, um, and able to get it done. So that's the way to do it. And long story short, um, I got this new turret up and running, and I kind of had to do a little bit of custom work to um, kind of get it all working right, with the aiming and then the tracking. I had to make sure, and it's always kind of a nightmare going going back to the rotation algorithm and stuff. Like this rotation algorithm, I tried to apply what I had for the other one, but even though it's a two-axis, it was completely different, and I kind of had to rework it from the ground up. But it has its proper angle limits. Doing a lot of testing here, and it tracks the usual way. It kind of leads and hits accurately depending on the velocity of the rigid body of the target. And then so that's all looking good. Um, and then I was testing firing, so I had to get the projectile working. It was quite a bit of work doing this turret part. There was a lot to it, but one of the processes it'll actually shoot at a lower Y offset, and then slowly defined with a curve, it'll come up to where the target is, and at that point, just before it comes up to the target, if you do a dodge, then you'll get your speed boost and all that, but that's pretty much how it works. And so yeah, did the turret looking pretty good here, and just a lot of testing to get it working. And then once that was all looking good, I hooked it into. I had to make sure, like, if you're out of range, that it'll stop shooting, and then when you come back into range, it'll start shooting again and whatnot, and all little edge cases and stuff. But I think it's looking good. One of the tricky business, again, I was trying to get this projectile aligned with the barrel, and it's always something when I'm trying to do that. It was like either IK or whatever, but I found that it just wasn't placing the actual whether because this I think it's because this is actually attached to a I think this is actually it's because this is attached to a skin mesh and there's an animation going on, but it wasn't the actual projectile spawn point wasn't aligning perfectly with where I put it. It was always off or some weird thing. And it's yeah, once again it's just like it's like why isn't this aligning where I put it? You know, sometimes it does. So I've done this several times before, like especially the last time was with the mech, you know, why isn't this aligning right? Do I have to put the spawn point on the bone? It's like how is this? So actually with more tinkering, like I actually figured out how to do it where I would actually set a private variable and say, hey, on late update, take the actual transform of the projectile spawn point and put it to that private variable and then use that private variable as where you're going to spawn it. So, and that did the trick. So I finally got a little handle on like how to solve this alignment problem. Like, you know, I was thinking about using like external points and stuff because that sometimes works. I had luck with that with the character, but this is actually much, you know, this actually worked out pretty good. So I did it like that, and then my problems kind of went away. So, um, you know, by the end of the week, I had it all kind of looking good. I had the lasers looking good, and I was doing just some testing again. And I think I had time at the end of the week. I was making up time on Saturday, and I went and did some testing. Let's see. And I actually, the next step was actually to put in the actual energy controller. So what will happen like now there I put in logic to where he will actually um, charge up his energy and over a certain course of time, and when that happens he'll actually flip over to like melee attack mode and he'll really speed up his rotation and his movement speed and he'll come at you. Uh, but I was doing some testing, and it was looking better and better like it usually does, but it's still very rough and not in demoable shape right now. Certainly for next week, I think I'll get it in order, but right now there's just a lot of issues. I think it was like I was starting to work with a behavior designer. There's issues with how I think it's like navigation or something. There's just more issues to figure out and debug and test. It's not really working all that great. Like as far as like uh, the behavior cycle when it gets within range, it should. So there's just more work to do, but it will actually speed up. But it kind of I'm not really sure what's going on. It'll kind of do some funky things and go to idle state or whatever it's doing. It's just not ready for prime time. But the actual energy controller part where it charges and it actually tells it to speed up and do that actually works okay. But the rest of it where and that's for next week, um, where I'll be putting in the first melee animation attack that hooks up into it. But that's how far I've gotten this week. So I got my ranged attacks looking pretty good, and I got mostly like a big chunk of this week was really spent on really carefully bringing in and clearly focus the actual design of the first boss encounter of like what exactly I want to build before I set out start building things. And you know, now I have my blueprint, and now I'm just the last part of the week I got a good chunk of things done um, as far as the first couple attacks go. But this is actually a large piece to implement. I think larger than the snake and larger than the the actual mech prototype. There's just a lot of stuff to do. I actually have a whole list of more things to do, which I don't know if I'll be able to finish up completely by the end of the week next week. I'll certainly get far, but I think it'll actually bleed over into a third week before it's really I've come down to, you know, a full-fledged prototype that's ready for prime time because this one is like we're actually doing a lot of gameplay testing in our prototype work. It's not like the HK. I left a lot of like gameplay stuff to later, especially for the mech as well. I was just building core features and functionality there, but this one, I'm doing the building and the actual gameplay testing for this boss and this go. So it's gonna take a little bit more time for this one in particular, but I made good progress this week, and um, I think next week it's gonna be even better. There'll be a lot more to show as far as this develops. So I think that's all I have to say for this week, and we will continue on and check you out next week. Goodbye.